okay, I'm going to get in trouble here, but it blows my mind that we have chief marketing officers of schools, VPs of marketing that don't do social media. Like they don't have social media.
Hey, welcome to the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast, a show where we bring together Marcom leaders from both inside and outside higher ed to give you fresh perspectives on successful organic content creation and strategy in higher education. My name is John Azzoni. I'm the founder at Unveiled, a video production company working specifically with colleges on their storytelling and commercial video content. You can learn more about our work at unveiled.tv. That's UNVEILD. And if creating content that resonates emotionally with your audience is a priority for you, then you need to be subscribed to the Higher Ed Storytellers Digest. It's my weekly newsletter where we cover a lot of ground about content creation and strategy in higher ed. So sign up for that for free at unveiled.tv/newsletter. All right, let's get on with the show. I'm going to introduce my guest today with a story which seems fitting for a storytelling podcast. So my daughter, Ellie, was 8, maybe around 8 at the time, and I went up in the hallway outside her bedroom. I could hear her iPad in her room, and she had her door closed. It's always a bad sign. I never like a closed door with my daughters. So I do what any, parent does that wants to just catch their kids and doing something. I just busted through the door, and she's in this contorted position on the floor. And I look on her screen, and there is Rob Clark and his kids from That Tall Family doing some challenge. She looks at me and she's like, I'm doing a TikTok challenge, Dad. Nothing crazy. So yeah, I was like, hey, I know that guy. And she thought I was really cool for a few minutes there. So yeah, with that, I want to welcome Rob Clark to the show. And I also want to thank you, Rob, for giving me a little cool dad moment there.
Oh, that's what we're all trying to do, right? We just try to be the cool dad once in a while.
Once in a while. Yeah. So disclaimer to listeners, we don't let our kids watch TikTok. I think she was on... We just call everything TikTok, anything that's a vertical video. I think she was on Shorts or something like that. And we also have since banned iPads in their rooms. So I recommend those two things for kids. Unless you're watching That Tall Family. It's all very wholesome stuff. So you were on the podcast a couple years ago. So you are now you've reached frequent flyer status with the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast. So just give us a brief primer for people who didn't listen to that episode, who you are, what you do, and we're going to talk about your book. So I want to hear about, kind of your journey to writing a book.
Yeah, for sure. So I think why it matters to the people that are listening to this podcast, about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, we decided to start a family brand on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, and since then into YouTube as well. Centered around just our family life. It came out of the necessity. I actually was working at a college at the time in Michigan, but that was like, if anyone remembers a few years ago, the world kind of shut down and some states were worse than others. And so Michigan wasn't a great place. We just moved there a few months prior. And what happened was that the schools were shut down, restaurants were shut down, and it was just not a good place for us to be. No one was out and about. So moving to Michigan at that time was tough because we weren't meeting friends. We weren't meeting people. We couldn't even, church wasn't really happening like normal. And so all that to say, we decided, well, what if we quit our job? I were to quit my job. We'll sell our house and we'll move down south. So at least the kids could be at school. Then we could have a little bit more of a normal life. It was just a different situation. So the only problem was I didn't have a job lined up. And so we moved south of Atlanta. And that is when we decided to start this idea of a family brand. And the whole idea was like, let's go for 3-6 months, maybe a year. And then during that time, the exposure would then lead me to some connections, would lead me to a job. And that was really the big idea. But it took off. It ended up becoming our main thing. But to come full circle, when we were in Atlanta, and Atlanta's an amazing city, but at the same time, it isn't crazy. Everybody was moving there. People from New York were coming and spending $50,000 or $100,000 over asking price in cash. And so it was a really hard place to find a home. It was a really hard place to it was a stressful place to live. And it's amazing for the right people, but as a family. So we decided to come back to where I grew up in the area. small town Illinois. We have family here, we have friends here. And so when we ended up here, then an opportunity came to do some more work for the university where my wife and I went to school at Greenville University, which was college at the time. So every time I say Greenville University in my head, I'm thinking college. But anyway, long story short, and so doing some social media with the school, and I've had, I think, 4 different jobs now in the last 2 years with the school. And so now helping with some of the marketing inside of athletics at the current moment, and still doing our own thing with social media. And so I do have my toes dipped in the higher ed world. A lot of the things that we talk about really is no different if you're running a for-profit business, if you're running a church, or if you're running a side hustle, or if you're running a university. A lot of the marketing principles really aren't that much different. And so I think in some ways that's a good thing, and in some ways it does make it challenging.
Yeah. I feel the same way about this podcast and most anything I talk about on LinkedIn. It's all the same principles. We just sort of apply it to higher education. But that's why I liked your book. It's really applicable across the board. And I didn't realize, maybe you did tell me this when we did that episode together, but I didn't realize until I was reading your book that you lived in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I grew up in Illinois. My wife, we met at college here, but she's from Canada. So after we both graduated, we actually moved back to Canada, and we lived there for 20 years. So all of our kids were born there. And it wasn't, until 2020, or I guess it was 2021 when we actually moved that we came down. So, we were in Michigan for 6 months, Spring Arbor University. My basketball coach, when I was here at Greenville, my basketball coach is a VP there. And so there was a connection and led to an opportunity there. And so it was a great opportunity for the school. And I actually liked working in the role. It was just all the life outside of the job that it was a tough time and a tough situation. So if people ask me about Michigan, there's always a caveat. I'm like, well, it was like the worst time ever to live anywhere. So I really can't give a fair assessment of our time in Michigan.
Yeah, honestly, like COVID has launched so many new things for, I think, so many people. I mean, that's why I went off on my own. I was working at a production company for over a decade, and I loved it. I was working with my buddies, and we were having a good time, and I was liking the work I was doing. I thought I'd never leave there. And then COVID hit, and just the need for flexibility with my kids, like scheduling flexibility to be able to just shut work off and turn it back on whenever I needed to, just became really apparent. And just, I feel like COVID just caused me to just reevaluate my whole life and what I wanted to do the rest of my life. So I was just like overnight, I just was like, woke up one day, I was like, I need to go.
Yep.
So, yeah. Okay, cool. Well, it's a great book. It's called Growing Your Influence. Hold it up here for the camera. Recently came out. So give us a synopsis of the book and tell me how the launch went.
Yeah. So the big idea is, and I talk to people often about social media. And of course, one of the biggest questions is where next week on YouTube, we'll hit 2 billion views. And so to put it in context, there's less than 2,000 channels that have that many views. And so we've also hit 2 billion on TikTok, and then another almost 500 million on Instagram and Facebook combined. And so people want to know, like, what's your secret sauce? And the way social media works is that anyone could have a viral moment. Like there's some things like you just don't know why it works. And so there are people that have, 10 videos and one goes viral, meaning it gets 1 million, 2 million views, whatever it may be, that it really performs very well. But what we found is that we have over 2,000 videos that we put out now. And so there is a consistency where we have every single week, we're having a video go to 1 million plus. And so what we found is that there is a mix, meaning that there is a little bit of skill, meaning that you have to tell a story. There's a little bit about all the things that the platform wants you to do, how important the first couple seconds are, using the right music, using even the right format, where as I look at higher ed, there are so many videos, and I know this is the work that you do, is that there's beautiful videos that are shot in horizontal format, and those are amazing for YouTube. Those are amazing for presentations. But for social media, for vertical videos, they're not great. And so a lot of people will have a very nice video and they just want to post it as is. Well, the platform's not going to push that out. And so,
No.
because it's not the right thing for the right place. And so there's little things like that. And vice versa. Like, and so it's not either or, it's both and, but it's putting the right product in the right place at the right time, with the right music. And so there is a science to that. And so people often ask me, like, what can I do to get my videos to be seen? And that's the whole point, is that you may not ever have a video go viral, meaning millions of views. But if you're posting and you're having 500 or 1,000 views per video, what can you do to get 5,000 to 10,000 views per video? That is very, very possible. And so, in a lot of times, it's the small things that you can do to make that happen. And so that was the big idea behind the book. As I talk with people about what they need to do differently, I just realized, like, I got this information. How can I package it in such a way that if someone does want to get better, then it's an easy resource. And I love this. I love talking about social media. It's like anyone. It's like you love talking about your kids, you love talking about your hobbies, and so the things that you care about. Having said that, obviously there's only so many conversations you can have. There's only so many podcasts, that you can host, John. And so the idea behind the book was it was an opportunity for people that wanted to go a bit deeper. And of course, anything in the book, you could find it easily on the internet, but it's like, where do you look? Where do you start? What works? What doesn't? So for us, we wanted to come from a place like, listen, this is what we've done for the last 4 years, and it's worked very well. And so it's one of those things where every caveat in the book is that, the results aren't going to be the same for everybody. I think if someone took my playbook, they could actually do better than we have. And of course, some people won't do as well because there's a lot of variables. But this playbook will actually get you to be efficient in doing social media, giving you the best chance to be seen by many more people.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever had to manage the creation of a video before with an outside vendor? Let me guess how this went for you, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. You found a video vendor whose work you liked. They quoted you a bunch of money to make this video, and then you had to do all the grunt work to make this thing happen. You had to make sure that everyone that was going to be in the video was going to be available on the same day. You sent out some date options. Only 2 of the 3 people were available, so you had to send out a whole new set of date options and times to try and get alignment. Then you had to secure locations to film. You had to get permission from certain professors to film in their classroom, and you had to do all this stuff that was just not in your job description when you took on your Marcom role. If even half of those details are true for you, it shouldn't be this way. You're not a video producer. A producer's job is to lead logistically. Unfortunately, a lot of videographers are just going to show up with cameras and expect you to do the rest. And at Unveiled, we hate that for you. So if the idea of working with an outside vendor on a big logistical undertaking like a commercial or a year's worth of ongoing storytelling content sounds like a pain in the butt, reach out to me and let's make it not that way. Head over to unveiled.tv and book a call with me. Unveiled is spelled Unveiled. Okay, back to the show. The whole thing with that tall family is your whole family is very tall and kind of has like that novelty to it. But what was like was there like one video where it just really took off for you guys, or was there like one kind of turning point where you decided like this was a viable pursuit?
So actually, I knew it's funny. If you go to our YouTube channel, I was posting YouTube videos 18 years ago. And early on, I do remember making my very first video for YouTube. And I think YouTube was only out like 6 or 8 months at the time. And I made a video, and it's actually my son who's now 21. He was young, and he was sitting in a chair trying to put on his socks as a 1-year-old. And he couldn't do it. He was struggling. He was frustrated. I put some music. There's actually a song. There's a song way back in the day. I called it Sucks to Be You. And so I played that song, and he's just struggling. And so it's funny looking back. It was very much like a TikTok style video then, but obviously that didn't exist at the time. And so when I put that video out, I was working at an insurance brokerage, and I used that as an ad for our insurance brokerage. And I said, like, life is hard. Insurance doesn't have to be. And so, and it got like 2,000 views. And so even the very first video, for me, I realized, like, you can create a piece of content that we created for free. We could put it on the internet for free, and it could be watched by thousands of people for free. No other advertising can you do that. I mean, billboards, radio, TV, like, you got to pay money for those things. And a lot of those things, you don't get any instant feedback or any feedback at all. How often, if you put up a billboard, you have no idea who sees it. You may know how many people drive by it, but that doesn't tell you anything. So for me, I knew at that moment, like 20 years ago, that I knew that having content online, there's something there. Now, fast forward when COVID first happened, we're living in Canada at the time before the lockdown started to happen. And I think it was like November, maybe December. And I forget, stuff was starting to happen. Just that was right before things started to happen. But I was coaching my daughter's basketball team. And so they're in junior high at the time, I think grade 7, grade 8. And we're in the gym and TikTok just came out or it just kind of hit that tipping point.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all had it, as a family scrolling through, just it's a new thing. It's interesting. It's blowing up. Everybody's talking about it. And so I decided to make this video where I had the assistant. I was like, here, hold this camera. And my daughter was underneath the hoop and just playing with basketball underneath the hoop. And so I went up along the side, dunked on her on the video and dropped down and like got in her face, like very playfully. And we put that on TikTok. And I remember like it went to a couple 100,000. And I still remember doing like a Facebook post about like there's nothing like getting street cred with your kids' friends and having a video with hundreds of thousands of views. Well, that video eventually went up to like 5 million views.
Wow.
And so that was our very first video that ever kind of went viral. Well, it did go viral. And so like I knew at that moment that this short form style of video, because even that's what I posted, 18 years ago, like I knew like that worked for us. But even before that, for years before that, I was making hundreds of long form video. And as you know, John, long form video is very hard. And so I would spend hours editing video at night that would get 100 views, 200 views, 73 views. And like, but funny story. I remember going into a car dealership before we had any followers at all and pitching to him to give us a Honda Odyssey in exchange for us creating content for his dealership. He literally laughed in my face and said, no one's ever going to pay you to make content. So like, I knew like, it just makes so much sense that creating content and for people to view it and in a way that could be like, I can have an idea, I could create a video, have it out to the world and be seen by millions of people within a 12-hour window. I mean, the actual filming, editing and posting could happen within minutes. And then within a day, you can have millions of views. And so just with that quickness of that feedback loop, like there's no doubt that this going forward, it's only going to continue to grow. And we're going to look back in a couple of years and wonder why we spent any money on anything except social media.
For sure. Yeah. I think it's such a great awareness tool. And I actually we do mostly, I would say, to be transparent, we do mostly like mid and bottom funnel type content for clients. We have started like experimenting with like, okay, while we're doing that stuff, this is probably only going to be relevant to someone that's already considering the school, seeing someone's story in the engineering program or something like that. What can we do that's more top of funnel that could maybe get some legs in a vertical format? It's a little more topical, And so that's one thing I've just learned is that like so much of that virality is great at the top of the funnel. And then it's such a good pairing with the longer form stuff once they're ready for it. But like, I'm the first to admit, I'm like, I don't know that like hundreds of people are going to watch this video that I'm making. But, even if like 50 of the right people watch it in the right context, I mean, they got to like pay attention,
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's both and. And so where the idea that a lot of times in marketing and definitely in higher ed, and I know you hear this all the time, it's like, well, we just want one really, really good piece.
Yeah.
And like, well, it doesn't work that way. And at the same time, if you decide to just go, we want to go super wide and never go, a mile wide and an inch deep, that's not helpful either. Right. And so it's a both and. And so the beauty is with social media, you can do the wide. If you know what you're doing, you can do it fairly affordable and fairly quickly. But it does give you that awareness that then allows you to go deeper. But if they don't know about you, you see that all the time. You can make the best video in the world, but if no one sees it, then it doesn't matter. And so whether we like it or not, the reality is that we live in a place where people don't sit down and start watching an 8-minute video. That rarely happens. They usually start with a 15-second video.
Or I mean, much less even like a 30 second. No one goes out of their way to watch a commercial, you know,
Mhm.
or a
Yeah, yeah,
marketing video. No one's like,
yeah.
man, I can't wait to get home from work so I can sit down with pretzels and a beer and watch, watch college marketing videos.
No, no, not at all. Unless, actually, funny that you say that, because last night my wife and I, we decided, like, because we're a basketball family, and so we decided, like, okay, when we watch the basketball game, let's actually watch the commercials, because we are just kind of curious, like, because you're right, like outside of Super Bowl, when's the last time I was like, I don't want to watch a commercial, but was just kind of interested in, and I don't know, I'm not deep in that world, but it's interesting. A lot of the commercials had like A-list and B-list celebrities. And it's like, man, they must be paying a lot of
Super
money.
expensive.
Yeah. And so it's like these are celebrities, and they're getting paid at least a million, probably more for these commercials. And then they got to shoot them and they got to put them on TV. And so at the end of the day, you're probably paying 10, 20, $50 million to be putting these commercials out for exposure. And if you did social media right, like it's not even close. For a fraction of the cost, you could reach more people.
Yeah. So I want to take us into your book. Like, what's one or two spots in the book that you want people to like really pay attention to? Like earmark this, come back to it, underline it. Like, what's kind of like some of the really main
Yeah.
content there?
So I think, as they get into the book, some of it starts off just as awareness. And I think if for higher ed, if we started there, because, and that's sometimes you got to put in the book, where I think if we take a step back from our jobs, whatever our jobs may be, and just think about how the world operates, then none of this is surprising. It feels like common sense. It's like, yeah, no one's going to go watch commercials, but what do? You go anywhere and people have their phones with them. They're always like, if someone leaves the house without their phone, they're going to go back to the house and get it. It's just the world that we live in. So the book starts with pointing out some of those things where we got to realize, like, the world we live in, that we could get in front with our message. If we believe in our message, we could put that message in front of the world at any given moment, instead of trying to say, like, okay, only in these certain times. And this idea, like, they got to be in the right place at the right time, they got to be in the right mood. Like, there's just too many variables, instead of, like, let's put them wherever we can. And one of the things that I talk about that I think in higher ed we need to consider more is the quantity leads to quality.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that sometimes we'll spend, tens of thousands of dollars for these high end videos, but we have no thought process of how to get people to watch those videos. And they're great, and that is going deep, and you need that. But if we don't think about how do we get people there in the first place, then I think we're wasting money. And that's where social media could come in, that we can drive people. And of course, so if we reach 100,000 people, only 10,000, 20,000 may get to the longer thing, but opposed to only a handful. So there's little things like that, practicality, where I talk about like quantity. And another thing was, like, we don't know exactly what people want to see. And actually,
Right.
thinking about higher ed, there's this, and I may get the story wrong, and you may know the story. There was a university at one point, and I think it was up north somewhere, where when they built a new building, they actually didn't put sidewalks in. They went a year
Oh
or
yeah.
two. You familiar with this story? And
I
then
can't
they,
remember where I heard it, but yeah, I've heard
yeah.
it.
And so they would see where the students walked, and then they wore a path, and then they put the sidewalks where the students were going. And I think that's real, but I think it's also a perfect analogy of how we need to think. And so instead of trying to say, well, this is how you need to think, and this is how you need to consume our content, and this is how you, so we need to go to the people and be like, no, like, how do you consume content? How do we put our message where you're at already? And so I think the book talks a lot about that. And so one of the stories that I tell is that and this happens if you create social media at all, where you will make a video and you think it's going to be amazing. It's like, this is amazing. It's going to crush. People are going to love it. And it
Yeah.
doesn't. Now, the vice versa happens. There was a time, and I tell the story in the book, about how we did a video just because it's like, we know that we have to get the quantity out. So we need to make videos. And we did this idea. I didn't think it was very good. I don't think, like, it just didn't feel great to me. I was like, whatever, but we got to put it out anyway. It ended up having 225 million views on YouTube. It's
Jeez.
our best video of all time on YouTube. And I didn't think it was going to do that well. And so that just shows you that we don't always get to decide what the people want. So in a college, there's so many things. Like in higher ed, there's all these different programs, there's the different sports, there's the different clubs, There's just a culture of the town or the city that you have your school in. There's so many things, and students choose schools for all those things. Sometimes there are, the one-offs, like I'm only going here to play basketball, or I'm only going here to take pre-med. But the vast majority take a lot of different factors into consideration. And I think that's where we need to think about quantity. Our colleges and our universities, we have to have social media that touches all those things, because all those things are how students choose which school to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that story about the sidewalks. I tell people, clients, when we work with them, I'll tell them, like, I can make a good video, but I can't tell the future. Like, I can't, if we're not starting with data here on what your audience likes, all of us in this room are just making assumptions, and we're going to guess. And so I really lean into that. Like, let's try some stuff, let's try some thought leadership stuff. Let's try some stories. Let's try, get a guest speaker on stage and have them talk about something interesting. It really, like, you just don't know what's going to work. And that's where sometimes I get, a little bit cautious. It's like, we're going to put like all these, like, we're $100,000 into this one video, and I'm like, you should have a video. Like, you should have one video that you feel is really captures the spirit of your brand, and you're going to blast it out. You're going to put paid ads behind it. And so it's not really about, like, you're going to control who watches it, just like a commercial, on TV or something like that. So I think that schools should have that. But I think, that's why, like, I'm really big on just, like, helping schools get, like, more of a quantity of content, still quality, but really balancing that, like, hey, let's not, like, belabor this one video. Let's just get it out there,
Yeah. And there is a line, and that's where we always have to figure out, there is as our kids would say, cringe, right? So we got to be above cringe, but at the same time, if we're at a 70%, we could spend a lot more money to get to 90%. And that actually might not actually make a difference going from 70 to 90%. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I get often is, like, how do colleges and universities stay on top of trends? And you have a part in your book about, like, the pitfall of chasing trends. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So it seems like most people doing social media, including higher ed, they fall in one of two categories. It's either never go to trends or always go to trends. And so, like most things in life, it's a both and. And so the idea is that we want to use trends because they're a trend for a reason, but not to chase them and only do trends. Because what happens when you only do that, then you don't actually build your own brand. Now, it could be helpful because if you jump on the right trend, you could go viral. You're going to pick up some people. You're going to learn a few things. But if that's all that you do, then you're not building your brand. And so, but when you're building your brand, you got to also be aware of culture and where things are at. And that's the beauty of social media, is that I think we could blend those two. But part of that too is getting back to what you were talking about, that we can't predict the future. And this is one of the things that social media does that no other marketing can do, at least at this speed and at this scale, is that right now, social media, the term organic basically means free, that you could put a piece of content out there for free and see how it performs. And so no other media can do that. Like we've already talked about, radio, TV, billboards, you got to pay and you have no idea if it's going to perform well or not. But with social media, you can actually put out a bunch of content, different styles, and you can see, because what's going to happen is you're going to have 3,000, 5,000, 7,000, 3,000, 8,000, 63, and all of a sudden 52,000 views. And you can take a look at, like, why did that video of 52,000 views do so much better than everything else? And what you can do is then take that piece of content and then put paid media behind it, meaning you could then turn that piece of content into your ad. And so I see so many ads, because I'm looking for them, of universities, and they look like every other university. You just swap out the logo and they look exactly the same. And we all know that if you get the metrics, yes, there's going to say you had so many impressions because the companies are paying them to get these impressions, but nobody's consuming that. You're not building your brand. It's people are going right by it. But if you actually had organic content that you made creative for your university that performed well, if you put money behind it, you know that people have already been watching it. So you know that it resonates for whatever reason. And then you could use that as your ad. So that's a word that, big Fortune 500 companies are doing this a lot now, and it's called brandformance. And the idea is that you see what does well, and then you pour the gasoline on that fire.
Right.
And so it takes the guessing out of it. And so that's another thing where social media now is changing how marketing works. Because I think as more and more people catch on, why would you not use marketing that works opposed to the old school where you have no idea if it's effective or not?
Yeah, I mean, totally. It's such a good, that the partnership between top of funnel with mid and bottom funnel needs to be there. Like there has to be, the social media team needs to be talking to the marketing team and the video team, because they're probably the ones that are going to figure out faster what's going to work. And so I see sometimes like schools that will put out like a commercial and then they'll brag about like how many impressions that it got. So it's got like so many like millions of impressions. And I'm kind of like, that tells you nothing. I mean, of course you got the impressions. It was on Hulu and people had no choice but to watch it. No one went out of their way. You don't even know if they actually watched it. They might have probably just got on their phone, started scrolling Facebook because they can't hit a skip button. So like that really tells you nothing. But the organic stuff really is such a great data mine for, you can see, like you said, just those spikes. And sometimes I feel like it's, maybe you have some thoughts on this. I find especially with YouTube shorts, like I could post like 5 clips from the podcast and one of them will have a clear spike, but there's really there's no telling like what was it about that one. I don't feel like the hook was any better necessarily. Sometimes I feel like it's a little bit random, but there are times when something just clearly hits, and you can go back and kind of reverse engineer that.
Yeah, and this is where the biggest metric or the biggest piece of engagement for social media is the shares. So the likes matter, the comments are great as well. And so to see what people are saying about the video, saying about your school, that's important. But when people share the piece of content, then that's when virality happens. And so in those clips, and that's when I look at the things that I have done that's gone viral. It makes sense when you think through the lens of why would someone share this? And so, and there's people that built entire brands off of creating content designed to share. Like, send this to your redhead, send this to your friend. If your friend sent you this, it means you got to take them out for a drink. Or, they literally build it in for that piece of content to be shared, because that's the most valuable piece of social media right now, because it leads to more views. And so anytime you have lots of views on any video, guaranteed that the shares are going to be proportionally higher.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. And that's something that I think about a lot too. Most of the stuff that I share is like thought leadership stuff. But even within that is like, I always stop and think like, would anyone have a reason to share this? Like, does it help someone express their identity? Like, this is what I believe too. Or does it help them, do they want to just be passive aggressive and share this thing that's like, I want my boss to see this, but I don't want to actually tell them,
Yeah.
So that is really important. So it seems like you look at other schools, what they're doing. Are there any, like, what schools are you a fan of their short form content?
Yeah. So one of the things that makes social media tricky is, how do we define success? And so, for example, That Tall Family, for us, like, our goal is virality. Our goal is the maximum amount of views, because how we get paid is when brands reach out to us and they say, well, we know that if you make a video for us, it's going to get viewed by a lot of people, which is valuable for us. And so that's our goal. Now, at a university, that's not necessarily the goal. Now, that's a piece of it, because the more you get in the funnel, more than likely, the more people you have that can see your school, know about your school. And so as a piece of it, but it's not the only piece. So having said that, as a caveat, one of the things that makes it really tough is that, and the same thing as big universities with a big brand name, and so I always use the word Harvard because for whatever reason, Harvard sticks on my head, is that Harvard is a global brand. They have billions in their endowment. And so they're in a different category. Like they could do whatever they want. Money's not the issue. The brand's not the issue. Now, politically, there's been some things that have kind of hurt their brand, but that's a whole different thing. But so when they do a piece of content on social media, like it's going to be viewed just because they already have that built-in brand. The same thing with professional sports teams. I would say that most professional sports teams, there are exceptions, but most of them aren't very good at social media at all. But because they're already a professional sports team and they got a fan base, it looks like their social media does well. They got lots of followers, they get lots of views. But if you look at, for example, Savannah Bananas, which if anyone is at all on social media, you've probably seen a piece of their content. Like they actually have more followers and more views than like all of the Major League Baseball teams combined. And so for them, obviously they're doing social media very well. And so, but it's built into their product. It's a piece of, they are a marketing media company that also plays baseball. And I think the way Jesse, the owner, describes it is that they're in entertainment, they're entertainers. And so, of course, that's a piece of it. So, all that to say is that when it comes to what schools are doing it well, unfortunately, I can't give you one example. I do look at schools, but it's hard to tell because I don't know on the back end. So, for example, we had, and this was even before I was involved at the school that I'm at now, Greenville University, the women's soccer program years ago when TikTok was new and early, they were posting videos. They actually didn't have that many followers. They posted a video that had a couple hundred views, and a girl in Texas laying on her bed sees one of these videos because she's into soccer and it's a soccer video. So it resonated with her. She calls the coach. She ends up, and now she's been on campus for years now, and she plays on the soccer team. And so that one video with only a couple hundred views led to a student. So it was free to make and ended up leading to a good player on the team and a student at the college. So all that to say is like, it's hard to say what is success and what isn't. I would say without a doubt that's success. But what I would say is that if you're not doing social media and if you're not doing it the way that it's going to make it most effective, then I would say you're doing it wrong. And so I would look at examples. And so little things where not using the right format, it being way too long. If it's only about like, there is a lot of like inside jokes. And so those would be examples where I'm like, that's not a good use of social media. Now, you can have an on-campus account, like the Barstool accounts or whatever. So you can have an account for students on campus. But when you're talking about the university as a whole, you need to think it through the lens of like, okay, how do we tell the story of who we are as a school? And there should be serious videos, but there also should be fun videos as well that just kind of get you attention. So and this wasn't a video we made, but right now there's a video all over the internet, Overtime and House of Highlights, and everyone's sharing it, where a track meet this past weekend, one athlete ran up and on a high jump and missed the mat. And so that happened at our school, wasn't one of our athletes. And those moments happen where now all of a sudden, now we're not going to get any students out of that, but those are types of examples where students are like, hey, our school's on House of Highlights and Overtime. And so there's fun things like that, which it's getting a lot of views, probably won't lead to anything, where sometimes a video with 1,000 views can lead to a new student or a new donor. So all that to say is like social media, but again, and I'll finish my point here is like, if we don't make content, put it out there, then none of that happens. And the fact that it's free, it'd be foolish of us not to lean into it more.
Yeah. It makes me think of this quote that belonged to this sort of like accountability, like action, like it's called Commit Action. It's like productivity accountability for small business owners. And the founder, in one of his yearly retreats or whatever, he said like, what they do is try to get you to think of the highest leverage tasks that you can do and do those every day. He's like, but there might be a task that like, it's like a slot machine. Like you can just pull the slot machine. It's very low effort and eventually something will hit and that will take off for you and produce a lot of return on investment. But if you look at it like pull by pull of the lever, it's not going to make sense, and I think that's like, yeah, it's like the more you get out there and the more you just put stuff out there and think about quantity, the more opportunities you are pulling that slot machine lever. And one video, I know, remember you said this on our podcast a couple years ago, like one video could make up for, a long time of no results.
You're exactly right. And I say that all the time. One video can change everything. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the one video that goes viral. And so, for example, I did a video early on is a brand deal, and it wasn't even a lot of money compared to what we do. But that one connection led to a little bit more, and he introduced me to someone that writes for Forbes and ended up getting a story about us in Forbes. And, things roll from there. So it's one of those things, like sometimes it's not even the video that gets the millions and millions of views that can change everything. And so it's sometimes you put things out there and you don't know where it's going to lead. I really do like that quote. I've never heard that before, but it does make a lot of sense. And I think it applies a lot to marketing as well.
Yeah. Well, cool. This is great. So give us a little commercial for your book. Where can people buy it? Who should buy it?
Yeah. So everyone in the world should buy it. So it's on Amazon. It's only on Amazon. And so let me give you a hot take as I push my book. And I want to go on the record, and I've said this, but this is the first time I've said it, publicly out there.
All right.
That I believe within 5 years, the social media team is the marketing team. That the social media managers, that the social media directors, whatever you want to call them, are now the CMOs, the chief marketing officers. I think we underestimate, even though we know how powerful social media is, we complain about it all the time, rightfully so. And, get back to the opening story. I think it's a great move to not let iPads be in the rooms of kids. We have the same rule in our house, no phones in the rooms with the door shut. At the same time, our kids are very versed in social media because it's also the world we live in. And I want them to be able to operate to the best of their ability. So my hot take is that within 5 years, 99% of marketing is social media. Because the writing's already on the wall. It's already happening. If you look at what Fortune 500 companies are doing, because they have all the research and all the money and all the data, that's where they're at. And that's where they're going even quicker right now. So schools, unfortunately, all schools, as an industry, higher ed as an industry, unfortunately, many times we have been too slow to the party. And so I would say if you're listening to this podcast, more than likely you're in higher ed, that you could get this book and it's going to tell you how to be effective. I would say read the first 3 chapters. And then if you have any questions, what I do is in the back of the book, I actually have my cell phone number. And I tell people, if you want to call or text, I will answer any question you have about social media. Now, there's a lot of experts out there that actually aren't even like, okay, I'm going to get in trouble here, but it blows my mind that we have chief marketing officers of schools, VPs of marketing that don't do social media. Like they don't have social media. And to me, that's crazy. That would be like me in charge of biology and say, okay, Rob, like you barely passed biology in high school. We want you to run the biology department and try to get more kids into pre-med. Like it's just mind blowing to me. Anyway, that's my hot take. But there's nothing on this planet that can get your message out to the world quicker, faster, more efficient, and for free than social media. So why wouldn't you want to use that tool to the best of your advantage? And so there's a lot of people that do social media. What my book tells you is how to do it to the best of your ability. That doesn't mean you're going to be a superstar. You don't have to dance on TikTok. But if you have a message and you want to get to the world, my book is a playbook. Again, you can find it anywhere out there on the internet if you knew where to search, but I packaged it. It's super easy. The only problem with social media, like there's a lot that changes so fast. And so already it's like, oh, there's like 3 things I want in the book, like right now that have changed in the last 3 months. But I guess that'll have to be book number 2.
Yeah. Maybe someday there'll be some AI where like books in print will just update themselves or something like that. Actually,
you're probably right.
Well, awesome, dude. Even just the last 3 minutes of this episode has been some of my favorite sound bites. Do I have your permission to clip the CMO thing?
You can, of course. No, okay. I jokingly say I'm going to get in trouble. I mean, what I actually do, and I do say it to people all the time because I want to be on the record as being correct. It's like, hey, remember when Rob said this? So I want to put stuff out there. So I would love for you to put it out on social. So in 3 years, I can go back and be like, hey, I was talking to John about this. You should have listened to me then.
Yeah, totally. All right, man. Super great having you again.
Yeah.
You're welcome anytime. And thanks.
Okay. Thanks, John. We'll talk later.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. 3 things I want to invite you to before you go. Number 1, if you want to know what's working right now in higher ed video, like what videos are getting tons of views, likes, comments, all that, you can get ungated access to our report, aptly named What's Working in Higher Ed Video, a comprehensive guide for higher ed Marcom leaders and content creators. So check it out at unveiled.tv/higheredvideo, and you might want to bookmark it because it's designed to be a resource for you that you can keep referring back to for inspiration. Number 2, reminder to sign up for my free newsletter all about content creation and strategy at unveiled.tv/newsletter. And number 3, follow me on LinkedIn. If you're searching for me, my name is John Azzoni. It's spelled Johnazoni. I'm on there all day, every day, for better or for worse, posting regular content and engaging with folks like you. So I'd love to connect with you on there. And with that, we'll catch you on the next episode of the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast. And as always, I am cheering you on. Okay, bye.